Hey guys, tonight we dive into the shadowy alleyways of the medieval world where secrets rot faster than cheese in the summer sun, and a wrong footstep might earn you a sword through the spleen. You're not a knight, or a merchant, or even a lowly scribe. No, tonight you're an assassin. You crouch in a cold stone chamber somewhere in a monastery basement that smells like mildew, old onions, and wet dog. A flickering candle barely lights the parchment in front of you. On it, a list of things you must memorize. Pressure points, noble family crests, 12 ways to feign food poisoning. Beside it sits your dagger. Well, not quite a dagger, yet it's more of a kitchen knife that's seen too many onions and not enough stealth. This is training, though no one calls it that out loud. Officially, you're a pilgrim of divine correction. Unofficially, you're being taught to kill quietly, quickly, and without waking the livestock. Your teacher is a man named Brother Alric. He's got 3 teeth, smells like a compost bin, and claims to have removed a corrupt bishop, once using only a communion wafer and a distracted falcon. You don't ask questions. You just nod while trying not to sneeze from the mold in the walls. The first thing you learn is that medieval assassins weren't sleek, acrobatic figures leaping from rooftops. No, they were scrappy, confused, and constantly underfunded. Training takes place in repurposed wine cellars and abandoned chicken coops. You practice stealth not in sprawling castles, but behind barrels of fish or under carts of hay that inevitably ends up in your underpants. Your first stealth exercise involves sneaking past a blindfolded goat. The goat wins. Twice. There's no assassin's creed, no official guild. Well, not one you can find, and certainly no retirement plan. Just a whisper network of monks, mercenaries, and weird loners who pass down tips like never kill a man before breakfast or always check your boots for scorpions. You're given a little handbook, hand-copied by candlelight. It's filled with helpful advice like avoid poison unless you enjoy your own funeral, and never trust a man with clean fingernails. There's a section dedicated to pretending to be a chimney sweep if you're caught, but seeing as you've never even seen a chimney before, that one's not super helpful. The second lesson is language. You need to know just enough Latin to eavesdrop in monasteries and make nobles think you're a fellow scholar. This leads to several hours of reciting things like ego sum arbor, I am a tree, and amo vinum calidum, I love warm wine, which are not particularly helpful in a sword fight, but at least they keep your mind busy. You also learn to climb. Badly. The only ropes you've got are hemp, frayed, and suspiciously damp. One morning, you fall into a rain barrel trying to scale a 3-foot wall. You try to pass it off as an intentional dive. No one buys it. Your weapons training is mostly just throwing old potatoes at a scarecrow dressed in nobleman's robes. You get surprisingly good at this. One time, you even hit the eye socket. Brother Alric calls this a breakthrough. You still don't feel particularly dangerous, just well practiced in vegetable assault. There's no uniform, but you're issued a cloak of shadows, which turns out to be a musty burlap sack-dyed gray. It smells like cabbage and fits like a tent. You try to hem it yourself. You accidentally sew your sleeve shut. The food is suspicious. You're told it builds stealth and sharpens your senses. You're fairly certain it just causes indigestion. On day 5, you're served a stew made from something they only refer to as bog meat. You eat it. You regret it. You then practice sneaking to the latrine at 3 a.m. without waking anyone, accidentally inventing the first stealth diarrhea maneuver. Now, about your fellow recruits. There's Tomas, who claims he once strangled a bishop with prayer beads. He didn't. Greta, who keeps pickling rat tongues for poison experiments. And Lothar, a very quiet guy who might just be here for the warm shelter. You become oddly close. Nothing bonds people like repeatedly failing to stab a sack of flour while being yelled at in Latin. One day, a real mission is discussed. Not for you. Of course, you're still in apprentice phase, which mostly involves latrine duty and carrying pigeons with secret messages. But when you overhear the mission briefing something about poisoning a wine barrel meant for a corrupt duke, you feel a shiver. Not of fear, but of excitement. This is what you're training for, sort of. You write your first code name on a scrap of parchment. The Weasel. You think it sounds clever. Tomas makes fun of you for 3 straight days. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins were organized professionals or just desperate criminals with good balance. The reality? You're somewhere in between. Skilled enough to open a locked door with a chicken bone, but not skilled enough to make it look cool. That night, lying on straw that smells faintly of goat and heavily of mildew, you try to imagine your future, leaping from towers, vanishing into the mist, maybe even getting paid in actual coin. But then a rat crawls across your foot, and you remember you haven't even passed the quiet walking test yet. So you breathe out, shift gently under your ragged woolen blanket, and tell yourself, tomorrow, you'll hit the flour sack on the first try. You rise at dawn, or at least what passes for dawn in this dim, drizzly hamlet where the sun seems to give up halfway over the horizon. The cold stone beneath your feet bites like a cranky ant. You're issued a cloak this morning, the ceremonial second-rank assassin wrap. Sounds cool. Looks like someone skinned an old carpet and forgot to shake it out. It's itchy, musty, and far too long, trailing behind you like you're trying to court a noblewoman with questionable fashion taste. You pull the hood over your head. It slumps forward and covers one eye. The fabric is so thick you can't hear anything clearly, and your peripheral vision now consists of exactly 2 goats and a barrel. Medieval tailoring, it turns out, was not an exact science. Today's lesson is blending in, which really just means learning how to look like you're supposed to be wherever you are, even if that place is a royal feast, a battlefield, or a peasant's privy. You practice by walking through the nearby market without anyone noticing. Simple, right? Except your carpet cloak makes you look like a drowned pilgrim. A passing child throws a turnip at you. An old woman asks if you're collecting donations for lepers. A dog follows you for 3 blocks, convinced you're carrying sausage. Blending in takes work. You memorize various peasant greetings. Practice the stiff bow of a mid-tier clerk. Learn to complain about taxes with appropriate bitterness. But no matter what you do, people keep staring at the hood. Maybe it's the smell. Maybe it's the bird nesting in the hem. You're taught to carry props. A broom, a basket of eels, even a fake priest's hat. These tools supposedly let you move unnoticed. But in practice, you just look like a confused person who's lost their way to a very strange costume party. One day, you're assigned to tail a local official for practice. You follow him through the town square, up the hill, across a bridge, and into the apothecary. So far, so good. You keep your distance. Try not to trip on your cloak. But then a gust of wind reveals your face. He turns, frowns, and calls you by name. Turns out you used to sweep chimneys for his cousin. So much for anonymity. Historians still debate whether medieval assassins used specific uniforms or just relied on context-based disguises. Judging by your experience, it was probably a chaotic mix of whatever was lying around. A tanner's apron, a stolen monk's robe, once even a fake beard made of horsehair. It itched so badly you nearly blew your own cover just from constant sneezing. Some days, you practice accents. The dialect of the northern fens, the clipped tone of a castle scribe, the lazy slur of a tavern drunk. Your impersonation of a nobleman gets you slapped by a real one. Turns out you mimicked his uncle's gouty lisp a little too well. Then there's the weather. Mud everywhere. Rain seeps into your boots. Your cloak drags through puddles like it's trying to soak up the entire river. You attempt stealth on a slate roof and slide off into a hay cart. The farmer offers you a job. You almost say yes. The truth is, there's no glamour in this job. No sleek black outfits. No secret blades that magically retract. Just wool, dirt, and the constant worry that you left your dagger in the wrong boot again. One afternoon, Brother Auric sends you into the noble district dressed as a chimney sweep. Your job? Scout the perimeter of a magistrate's house and identify guard patterns. You spend 2 hours pretending to clean an empty chimney while trying to peek through a second-floor window. The soot is real. The cleaning is fake. You get black in your ears, your nose, even your teeth. When you finally return to the monastery, no one recognizes you. Greta throws a bucket at your head. You learn to be still, unseen, how to stand by a wall and fade into it, how to walk like a servant, not a threat, how to listen without reacting. It's not easy. Every instinct screams for motion, for the need to scratch, to shift, to breathe. But you resist. Mostly. You also learn one golden rule. Never look suspicious while looking suspicious. There's a difference between lurking with purpose and hovering like a bad ghost. Tomas forgets this and gets chased out of a tavern by a broom-wielding innkeeper. There's a fringe theory that some medieval assassins relied heavily on theater training, acting, gestures, dramatic expressions. It might explain why you spend an entire evening practicing dying nobly in case you get caught and want to go out with flair. Your performance gets mixed reviews. After a long week, you're finally sent to a noble wedding as a servant. It's a field test. You wear a scratchy brown tunic, carry trays of cheese, and try not to step on anyone important. Your real mission? Slip upstairs and retrieve a parchment map from the groom's library. It goes mostly fine, except you trip on your own tunic during the third course and spill pickled onions on a baroness's lap. Her screams distract the guards long enough for you to grab the map and flee. A win, technically, though the monastery receives a strongly worded letter the next week. You sit on your cot that night, cloak hanging damp by the hearth. You smell like soot and onions. Your knees ache. There's a pigeon watching you from the rafter, probably judging your posture. You wonder, briefly, what it's like to be one of the nobles you target. Silk sheets, real bread, a bath more than once a season. Then again, they don't get to wear cool disguises or vanish into the shadows. They don't get to be the weasel. You grin, one eye swollen from a chimney brick, 3 fingers still black with soot. But hey, today, you blended in. Sort of. You're awakened by the distant scream of a rooster and the much closer scream of Tomas, who's just discovered a ferret in his boot. Another training day begins, and today's lesson is poison. Brother Auric sets the mood with dramatic flair. He sweeps into the hall wearing gloves and a woolen scarf wrapped tightly over his nose and mouth. You will fail this, he says cheerfully, and probably die. Then he dumps a small wooden crate onto the table. Out tumble vials, herbs, crushed beetles, suspicious powders, and one slightly confused frog. Your job, according to Auric, is to learn which poisons do what, and more importantly, how not to accidentally kill yourself with them. Turns out, the medieval poison scene is both terrifying and wildly inefficient. You begin with the classics: hemlock, nightshade, wolfsbane. The kind of stuff that sounds poetic until you realize most of it just gives people stomach cramps and the occasional drooling episode. One root you crush too hard releases a smell like old garlic mixed with shoe leather, and Greta faints on the spot. She recovers. The frog does not. You make a chart of effects. What stings the tongue, what numbs the fingertips, what makes someone dance involuntarily before collapsing. Yes, that's a real one-mandrake root. Maybe, or something mislabeled by Tomas, who once confused saffron with dried lizard intestine. You don't ask why he had both. The monastery's testing chamber is a room with one window, a lot of buckets, and a table scorched from at least 3 confirmed accidents. You spend hours grinding herbs with a stone pestle that smells permanently of regret. The goal? A tincture that can be slipped into wine, porridge, or communion bread without anyone noticing. You try yours on a crust of stale rye. It makes you dizzy. You make a note. Less monkshood, more honey. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins relied heavily on poisons or simply used them when stabbing wasn't an option. There's some evidence of hired hands poisoning chalices, but records are sketchy, mostly trial confessions given under persuasion by hot iron. Charming. You're given a neutralizer, which is basically watered-down vinegar mixed with burnt rosemary. It's supposed to stop accidental poisoning. It doesn't. You spend one night vomiting behind the latrine while Greta fans you with a torn map of East Anglia. A week into poison training, you're assigned your first real-life test subject, a pig. Not exactly high stakes, but the idea is to mimic a noble's diet and see what dosage causes what symptoms. You mix a little belladonna into the animal's gruel. Nothing happens. You mix a little more. Still nothing. You add a sprig of something labeled "Definitely do not use in faded ink." The pig explodes. Not literally, but the noises it makes are enough to clear the training hall. Tomas suggests using less next time. Auric suggests never cooking anything for anyone. You suggest, quietly, that maybe stabbing is easier. Then comes the paranoia. You start to wonder if you've been poisoned. That weird tingling in your fingers, was that from the nightshade? Or did you just sleep on your hand funny again? That sour taste vinegar from the neutralizer, or an early warning sign? Every sneeze feels like the beginning of the end. You sniff your own cup. Twice. Greta starts carrying dried sage bundles for protection. Tomas wears gloves at all times, even while bathing. Lothar simply hums to himself and eats nothing but barley mash. He might be onto something. There's also a side course in antidotes. Mostly ineffective. The best solution to most poisons, Auric says, is don't get poisoned. But there's some hope. Milk thistle for mild toxins, crushed charcoal for absorption, and oddly goat's blood mixed with honey, if you don't mind the taste of failure and disappointment. You practice disguising poisons in drink. Red wine is easy. Ale is harder, it fizzes. Mead? Forget it. Too sweet. You try mixing a powdered substance into an apple tart and accidentally invent the worst pie ever baked. Greta throws it at a rat. The rat sniffs it and leaves. Fringe texts in the monastery's restricted scroll cabinet mention stranger poisons. Snake spit left to ferment in moonlight, dried toad skin smoked like tobacco, and something called monk's tear. No one knows what it is, only that it causes intense regret followed by unstoppable singing. Historians think that last one might have been a joke. You kind of hope it wasn't. Then there's poison etiquette. You're taught never to poison water meant for communal use, unless you really mean it, and always to wash your hands, especially after handling anything with a skull and crossbones symbol scratched on it. That rule comes after Tomas tries to eat a biscuit with arsenic dust on his fingers. He spends 3 days speaking in couplets. Unrelated, probably. Finally, you're tested. Each recruit is handed a tray of food. Only one dish contains a mild poison enough to cause some, shall we say, discomfort. Your job is to identify it without tasting. You sniff. You squint. You almost lick the soup before remembering rule number 1. You guess correctly. The tainted dish? Goose pâté with a hint of foxglove. Greta gets it wrong and spends the next 12 hours composing angry poetry from the floor. That night, your hands still smell faintly of vinegar and ash. You curl up under your blanket, trying to ignore the mild itch in your throat. Is it from the herbs? Or just the mold in the walls again? You think back to your first lesson, how you dreamed of slipping poison into a goblet, vanishing into the shadows while a corrupt duke slumped dramatically during dessert. Now you know. It's more likely to involve indigestion, a wrong dose, and someone yelling. Why does this stew taste like feet? You drift off, imagining safer career options, like dragon taming or chimney sweeping. Again, you're roused before sunrise by the dulcet tones of Brother Alric banging a ladle against a dented helmet. Target practice, he cries, with the glee of someone who's had too much boiled nettle tea and not enough therapy. You roll off your cot, still tasting last night's vinegar antidote, and prepare for a day of glorious simulated murder. Today, you're not blending in. You're not poisoning anyone's gruel. You're going to learn how to kill the old-fashioned way with a weapon, a plan, and possibly some turnips. First, the lesson on stalking a mark. Your target is a burlap sack filled with straw, perched on a stool, and wearing an old hat. You are told this represents Duke Renwald of Northmarch. The likeness is not strong, but the attitude? Surprisingly accurate. Your goal? Figure out how to sneak past imaginary guards, reach the Duke, and deliver a silent strike to the throat, heart, or kidneys, your choice. You're given a wooden dagger, a map scrawled in chicken scratch, and a 3-minute head start. You hide behind a cart of beets. Greta hides under the cart. Tomas tries to blend in as a beggar and gets sneezed on by a real one. You dash forward, leap over a low wall, and jab the sack in the side. Alric frowns. That's the spleen, he says. Dukes can live without one. Noted. You're made to practice for hours crawling through muddy trenches, scaling low stone walls, tiptoeing through clanking kitchens. You memorize door patterns, servant schedules, even which window the Duke enjoys brooding in front of during thunderstorms. This, you're told, is intelligence gathering. It mostly involves eavesdropping while pretending to dust furniture. You're assigned roles. Greta becomes a chambermaid. Tomas, a torchbearer. You get to be the stable hand with gout. You shuffle, limp, moan occasionally, and take frequent rest breaks while mapping the guard rotations. Oddly, this may be your most convincing disguise yet. Then there's the matter of weapons. You're shown an array of daggers, stilettos, short swords, and something called a whisper blade, which is really just a sharpened knitting needle. You test each on various fruit. Apples are too soft. Turnips, however, provide excellent resistance. Thus, the turnip becomes your new best friend. Historians note that assassins in the Middle Ages likely favored small, concealable weapons, though there's debate over whether they were primarily designed for stabbing or intimidation. Either way, you settle on a triangular blade that fits inside your boot. You promptly forget it's there and stab yourself trying to remove your sock. There's also a lesson on timing. Killing a Duke isn't just about skill, it's about opportunity. During a feast, too many witnesses. During his bath, too many splashes. But during his afternoon nap in the sunroom, prime stabbing conditions. You practice slipping in during a mock nap setup. Tomas plays the snoring Duke. You trip over his footstool. He wakes up and yells, "Guards." Alric gives you a 6-point deduction for breaking a vase. You also study diversions. Smoke pellets, thrown coins, and the classic someone's choking on a pie. Routine. Greta perfects the latter with disturbing flair, collapsing to the floor in dramatic gasps while flinging crust into the air. She gets a round of polite applause. You try the smoke pellets and accidentally gas the laundry room. 3 novices faint and smell like burnt time for a week. One training day involves a full mock castle setup. Blankets draped as walls, buckets stacked as towers, and a stern-faced goat representing a guard dog. Your mission: enter, assassinate the decoy Duke, now a hay-filled tunic nailed to a chair, and exit undetected. You make it past the goat, scale the tower with minimal bruising, but as you slip into the bedchamber, you hear a sneeze. You freeze. Tomas is in the wardrobe. "Wrong castle," he hisses. You both stare at each other for a long moment before bursting into uncontrollable laughter. The goat charges in and ruins the carpet. That evening, during review, Brother Alric says, "A true assassin prepares for failure, because failure will happen." He then lists all the times he botched a job: once mistook the Archbishop of Canterbury for a baker, once hid inside a wine barrel only to get rolled into a lake, and once spent 4 weeks in a basement because the Duke postponed his own murder due to gout. Your turn to share comes. You admit you still can't tell the difference between spleen and kidney when stabbing a turnip. Alric nods solemnly. Many don't. Fringe accounts suggest that some assassins relied on superstition before a kill: prayers, charms, even special underpants. You develop your own ritual: 3 deep breaths, a silent apology to the turnip, and a quick pat of your boot blade. Eventually, you're given a live simulation, an actual manor, lightly guarded, during a wedding celebration. Your team is split into roles. Greta distracts the kitchen. Tomas sets off a false alarm in the stables. You sneak through the larder, slip upstairs, and enter the noble's reading room. Inside, just a sleepy old scribe and a very large cat. No target. Wrong room. But you practice anyway, silently crossing the floor, neutralizing a cushion with your blade, and retrieving a scroll as fake evidence. Mission sort of accomplished. Back at the monastery, your cloak is heavier with mud and minor victory. You didn't kill a duke, but you did learn 3 new window types: how to mimic a noble's sneeze, and which floorboards creak during a thunderstorm. You lie in bed, thinking about that sack with the hat, about turnips and whisper blades and goats named Flossie. You're getting better. Not great, but better. And the next time you see a real nobleman dozing in the sunroom, you'll know exactly which window to crawl through and which spleen to aim for. Your handler hates you, not just in a distant, bureaucratic sort of way, but in a deeply personal, soul-level kind of loathing that radiates off him like wet wool after a thunderstorm. His name is Father Wyman, though he's not really a priest, more of a former monk turned intelligence broker with anger issues. He has a long scar down one cheek, a crooked nose, and a deep mistrust of anyone under 35. You're 19. He already calls you fungus. Wyman handles all mission assignments, which is a generous way of saying he sends you on tasks so vague and poorly organized that you spend more time figuring out what you're supposed to do than actually doing it. Your first real job? Remove the bishop's eye. That's the entire instruction. Turns out, he meant eye as an informant. You spent 3 days trying to find the bishop's optometrist. This week, your orders come wrapped in pigskin parchment, tied with a fraying string, and stained with what you hope is wine. You're told to travel 2 villages east to deal with a minor noble who's been whispering things best left unsaid. The note contains no name, no map, and the phrase "you'll know him by his hat." You really hope it's a distinct hat. You gather your kit blade, cloak, disguise gear, broom, loot, and fake eye patch, and set off on foot. It rains the entire time. At one point, a cart splashes you with something you pray was just mud. You pass 3 different nobles, all wearing vaguely hat-shaped objects. You tail them each for hours. One turns out to be a goose breeder. Another is a deaf poet. The third slips you a note. Nice try. Tell Wyman I still owe him 7 pigs. You never figure out who the target actually was. You return to the monastery soggy, irritable, and very much alive, which, in Wyman's opinion, is the only failure that matters. He stares at you for a long moment, then mutters something about these new assassins, all wine and no spine, and hands you a new assignment with a map drawn by someone who's clearly never seen a river before. Historians debate whether handlers like Wyman were common in medieval assassination networks. Some suggest there was a hierarchy, with senior agents managing apprentices. Others believe assassins worked independently, which honestly sounds like a much better deal. Wyman has two moods: irritated and boiling rage. He drinks constantly from a flask he swears is for digestion, smells faintly of burnt garlic, and once threatened to disembowel you with a broken quill for asking where North was. His office is a dusty cell stacked with scrolls, contracts, and something that might be a mummified chicken. He gives no encouragement, only sarcasm. When you complete a mission, you didn't completely ruin it. When you fail, fungus, you were born wrong. The worst part? He's probably the best assassin you've ever met. He tells stories, often while sharpening something, of sneaking into a fortress disguised as a funeral priest, of swapping out a Duke's ink for nightshade concentrate, of surviving for 6 weeks in a chimney with nothing but beef jerky and rats for company. You're not sure how many are true, but the look in his eye, equal parts haunted and bored, makes you think most of them are. Your second mission under Wyman is more straightforward. Intercept a courier on the road between 2 towns and recover the scroll he's carrying. Easy. You stake out the road for hours, crouched in a tree that is home to at least 3 angry birds and 1 mildly suspicious squirrel. Eventually, a rider approaches. You leap down dramatically. It's the wrong courier. The scroll contains a recipe for pigeon pie. Wyman is not pleased. You are reassigned to low-priority extraction, which is code for digging through trash outside noble estates in case someone discarded a letter too quickly. You find moldy bread, an old shoe, and a child's drawing of a knight stabbing a dragon labeled Dad. Eventually, you're promoted back to field missions. Your third task is simple. Deliver a poison ring to a lady-in-waiting. Not kill her, just plant the ring in her jewelry box. Easy, right? Except you accidentally drop it into her bathwater, which kills a fish. You spend 2 hours replacing the fish and 3 more pretending to be a towel boy. In the end, you leave the ring under her pillow and pray for plausible deniability. Back at HQ, Wyman grumbles about lack of initiative and throws a wooden spoon at your head. Greta says that means he's starting to respect you. You begin to notice his quirks. How he only trusts left-handed maps. How he insists on using a goat as a message carrier. How he marks targets with phrases like delicate flower, noblewoman with a temper, and mutton foot, archbishop with gout. You learn to read between the lines. Quietly means don't leave witnesses. Swiftly means don't spend 3 days lost in a turnip field again. Historians rarely mention the logistics of medieval assassination, but fringe texts imply that poor communication was a recurring hazard. One letter from the 13th century simply reads, "I told you to remove the Baron's cousin, not his cat." You also realize Wyman is watching always. He appears out of nowhere in the marketplace, disguised as a monk. Sits behind you at taverns in different clothes. Once, you catch him hiding in a tree outside your room, eating pickled onions. He doesn't explain. He never does. And slowly, you begin to understand him. Beneath the bile and sarcasm is someone who has survived, who has seen what this job does to people. The paranoia, the hunger, the constant disappointment. Maybe his hatred is a kind of armor. Or maybe he just really hates you. Either way, you adapt. You triple-check your disguises. You study his maps. You learn to predict his snide comments before he makes them. Even offer your own sarcastic retorts. He doesn't smile. But once, he doesn't throw anything. And that night, lying on your cot, cloak bunched beneath your head, you admit something to yourself. You kind of like the old toad. So, this is how it feels to get paid. You open a burlap sack and stare into the wide, unblinking eyes of a dead chicken. There's also a wooden cup of thick, lumpy beer and a wedge of cheese that's mostly mold with a side of something crunchy. You look up at the steward who handed it to you. He shrugs. Times are tight. Congratulations. Your first contract was a success. If you define success as not dying and being mildly thanked with a poultry carcass and a handshake that smelled of turnips. Apparently, nobles don't like to be seen compensating assassins with actual coin. Too traceable, too scandalous, too lawful. You trudge back to the monastery, chicken slung over one shoulder like a soggy trophy, trying to decide whether to eat it or trade it to Lothar for another map of the local sewer network. You settle for drying it by the hearth. Greta names it Lord Pecksworth. This is your life now. Brother Auric congratulates you with a head nod so subtle, you think it might have been a spasm. Wyman scowls, mutters, beginner's luck, and hands you a slip of parchment. Next job. Bring your own rope. You expect money eventually. Real coin. Enough to buy a new cloak or maybe a bath that doesn't come with eels. But for now, your earnings come in strange currencies. Bread, ale, a half-broken dagger, and one IOU from a drunk noble who insisted you were his long-lost nephew. There's a rumor among the junior assassins that the really big jobs pay in silver. Cold, weighty, illegal silver. Enough to disappear to the coast and open a pie shop. But no one you know has ever seen any. Most of them get paid in salted fish or the medieval equivalent of store credit. Do this, and we'll put in a good word with the bishop. Fringe sources suggest many assassins moonlighted as messengers, rat catchers, or actors, anything to cover the gaps between unreliable gigs. Tomas tries his hand at street performances, juggling daggers and reciting bawdy limericks. It earns him 2 coins and a slap from a passing nun. You try to barter your moldy cheese for a better weapon. The blacksmith laughs so hard he drops his tongs. Eventually, you trade it to Greta for a bottle of sleeping draught she swears works on pigs and people. You're not brave enough to test it yet. One day, a noble client requests your services personally. This is unusual. Most contracts come through the shadow channels. Coded messages, cloaked intermediaries, unsettling pigeons. But this man, Baron Ulfric, sends an actual footman to the monastery with a wax-sealed letter bearing a seal in the shape of a screaming badger. The letter reads, "Discreet removal requested. Payment, 3 gold coins and a small plot of land near the river." You read it 3 times, just to be sure it doesn't say 3 goats or 3 gold-colored rocks. You take the job, heart racing. Your task? Eliminate a rival merchant who's been too clever for his own good. Sounds straightforward. You travel to the city under cover of dusk, disguised as a chimney sweep, again, and locate the merchant's home. 2 stories. Guard dog. 1 sleepy servant who's more interested in his soup than his post. You slip through a window, make your way upstairs, and find the merchant praying at a small altar. He hears you. You freeze. He turns, and instead of screaming, he sighs. "I was wondering when you'd come." Turns out, this merchant knows the game. He's been expecting this for weeks. He even offers you a drink before you do the deed. You accept cautiously. It's terrible wine, but the gesture is oddly civil. You hesitate. He talks. He tells you about trade routes, about undercutting the Baron's wine exports, about how all he wanted was to sell honest vinegar. "This is what gets me killed," he says. "Vinegar?" You nod. You offer a painless draft. He takes it without protest. When you return, you're given the promised gold well, 2 coins and a note that says the land is currently under review by the bishop's office. You never see it, but the coins are real. Heavy. Your hands tremble as you hold them. You hide them in your boot and say nothing to the others. Not even Greta. That night, you buy yourself a proper cloak. Black wool. Lined. It even fits. You feel it's professional. The next morning, Wyman tosses a sack at you. Inside, another dead chicken and a moldy turnip. You're not ready for real pay. He mutters. Not yet. Historians suggest some assassins were never paid in money at all, only favors, debt forgiveness, or shelter from the church. It was, as one chronicler put it, an economy of shadows. You're starting to see why. Still, you keep the gold hidden. You run your fingers over it at night, a private reminder that you are getting somewhere. That all this mud and mold and moral ambiguity might lead to something better, or at least something warmer. You add your name to a small, handwritten ledger hidden in the monastery's cellar, a list of those who've earned their coin. Most of the names are crossed out. Dead, missing, retired to a life of sheep herding in distant hills. You're not sure which fate is preferable. Back in your cot, Lord Pecksworth the chicken watches you silently from his perch. He smells faintly of smoke and victory. You're not rich. You're not safe. But for now, you're paid. And that, in this world, is almost the same thing as winning. You're crouched in a dark alcove behind a stone column, wearing a robe that smells of sheep and despair. Across the chapel, monks chant in low, droning Latin. The scent of incense wafts thick through the air, mingling with wax smoke and whatever the novice beside you had for breakfast, probably salted cabbage and regret. You're here to infiltrate a monastery, not destroy it, not rob it, just slip inside, pose as a scribe, and intercept a message being copied by a particular monk with a suspicious fondness for metaphors about fire. A quiet job, a delicate job. Naturally, it's going terribly. Your Latin is, let's say, enthusiastic. Not accurate, but passionate. You can copy letters, yes, but your handwriting looks like a chicken tried to sign its name while running from a dog. When you hand your first copied scroll to the librarian monk, he squints at it and says, "Is this written in pain?" Still, they let you stay. Scribes are hard to come by, and you're quiet, which counts for a lot. Also, you've memorized the daily routine: bells at dawn, porridge, chanting, writing, more chanting, questionable fish stew, and bed. It's rhythmic, peaceful, almost suspiciously peaceful. Your target, Brother Arno, is a wiry man with ink-stained fingers and eyes like boiled turnips. He hums when he writes, constantly, and he talks to his scrolls, mostly apologizing. You suspect he may be hiding something, or simply cracked under the pressure of copying the book of very long lineages for the 7th time. Historians still argue whether monasteries were common places for espionage and assassination. Some say yes, monks knew all the secrets. Others argue monks were more likely to fall asleep on their parchment than conspire with anyone. Your experience? Definitely both. You're assigned to Arno's scriptorium as an assistant, which is a fancy way of saying ink fetcher. You spend hours grinding pigment from soot and vinegar, trying not to spill it on your robes. You do. Twice. Then there's the illumination work. Fancy letters. You're told to paint a capital L shaped like a lion. You produce what looks like a ferret in a hat. Arno nods politely and says, "Well, it's spirited." You keep an eye on him. Watch who he speaks to in the cloister. Track which scrolls he carries to the abbot's chambers. Eventually, you spot it. A thin roll tied with red ribbon, tucked into his sleeve. You trail him that evening, humming softly to mirror his own peculiar tune. He heads to the tower. Odd, since monks don't typically climb towers after supper unless they're up to something, or they've lost a bet. You wait, then follow. Inside, you find the scroll in a basket of firewood clever, hidden in plain sight. You pull it free, unwrap it carefully, and squint. It's in cipher. Of course it is. Back in your cell, you work on decoding it by candlelight, nibbling on a hunk of bread that could also serve as a bludgeon. The message appears to concern land movements, troop counts, maybe even a heretical bishop. You jot down what you can. Then comes the real problem, getting it out. You're deep in the monastery, surrounded by locked gates, curious monks, and at least one cat who seems to know too much. The plan? Stage a library accident. Greta taught you this one. You spill ink on a stack of documents. Scream. Knock over a candle. People rush in. You slip the scroll into your robe, while flapping about like a confused heron. It works. You're reprimanded, but not too harshly. Scribes are expected to be eccentric. Before you leave, you're given a blessing by the abbot. He places a hand on your head and says, "May your pen be sharp and your silence sharper." You're not sure if it's a prayer or a threat. Fringe accounts suggest some monks were actually assassin sympathizers, slipping coded messages into hymnals or carving directions into the bottoms of wax seals. You check every hymn you see now, just in case. Back at the monastery headquarters, Wyman reads your decoded message, grunts, and says, "Took you long enough." He doesn't say thank you. He never does. But later that night, you find a fresh loaf of bread by your bed, no mold. No bugs. Just warm, soft bread. Luxury. The infiltration leaves a mark on you. You start to chant to yourself when nervous. You mutter psalms while sharpening your blade. You even find comfort in the rhythm of monastic life, clean, ordered, mostly silent. You also keep the ferret lion illustration. As a reminder of what? You're not sure. That even bad art has a place, maybe. There's a second mission soon after. Sneak into a rival abbey posing as a traveling illuminator. You bring samples, fake ones, better this time, and your portfolio includes a rather cheeky saint with an exaggerated halo. The monks love it. One even asks for a copy. While there, you overhear a plan to smuggle relics across the border. Fake relics. One is supposedly a thumb bone from St. Tobias. You recognize it instantly, it's a chicken toe. You make a quiet note to investigate further. Because relic fraud? That's way above your pay grade and oddly profitable. Back in your cot, you stare at the ceiling, listening to the soft snore of Lothar and the rhythmic scratch of Greta sharpening something far too enthusiastically. You think about monks, about fire metaphors, about how ink stains never truly fade. You smile, because for once, the job was quiet, clean, no goats, no stabbing, just words and patience, and possibly the occasional chicken toe. You're face down in the mud again. This time, it's not due to botched stealth or Wyman's training drills. No, this time, you've just been ambushed by an extremely aggressive goose guarding the servant entrance to Lord Halford's castle. You're not sure if it's trained or simply evil, but either way, your shin is bleeding and your dignity is somewhere in the hedgerow. The mission was supposed to be simple. A stealth entry through the back gate, sneak into the kitchen, borrow a key from the head cook's quarters, and find the ledger room. No murder, no mayhem. Just information gathering. What no one mentioned was the goose. Now you're crouched behind a rain barrel, wet, muddy, and trying to coax the creature away with a crust of bread. It does not want the bread. It wants revenge. Assassins are trained for all kinds of threats. Guards, dogs, poison traps, even irate monks. But geese? No training prepares you for a creature whose only goal is chaos. Its wings flap with the force of a medium-sized hurricane. Its beak is alarmingly precise, and its honking has attracted the attention of at least 2 guards. You eventually manage to scramble over the garden wall, sacrificing 1 boot and a generous piece of your cloak in the process. The goose, triumphant, stands atop a flower bed like a warlord surveying a battlefield. Inside the castle, things aren't much better. The kitchen is loud, smoky, and smells like burnt onion and fish grease. You pose as a scullery boy, grab a dirty apron, and start scrubbing something that may once have been a turnip. You blend in mostly by looking miserable, which is surprisingly easy. The cook's quarters are just off the pantry. You wait for the shift change, sneak in, and locate the key tied to a string around a stuffed pig toy. You don't ask questions. You just take the key and retreat before someone notices their porcine guardian has been disturbed. The ledger room is quiet, gilded, smells faintly of beeswax and old paper. You find the document Wyman wanted a contract between Lord Halford and someone using the code name Red Thorn. You don't read the whole thing. You don't need to. Just copy the sigil, take note of the dates, and slip out. Except the goose. You forgot about the goose. It's waiting for you. In the courtyard. Like a feathery revenant. You freeze. It flaps. You run. You sprint through the garden, past startled servants, and into the stable where you hide behind a pile of hay, panting and whispering, "I will not be bested by poultry." Tomas later says the goose had murder in its eyes. Greta suggests training it to join your team. Lothar simply nods solemnly and lights a candle for your boot. Historians rarely mention geese in medieval espionage, possibly because most assassins didn't survive long enough to file a complaint. But a fringe record from 1327 describes a fowl of unnatural ferocity guarding the chancellor's privy. You believe it. You return to the monastery with bruises, a limp, and an overwhelming hatred for all waterfowl. Wyman raises an eyebrow at your state. You hand him the copied sigil. He says, "I expected worse." That night, you soak your feet and think about all the ways a job can go sideways. You used to worry about swords, traps, and nosy scribes. Now you've added animals to the list, particularly ones with wings and vendettas. But it's not just geese. Sometimes it's goats, still angry about that tower drill. Sometimes it's bees, never try hiding in a hive. Sometimes it's just mud. You learn that the world resists quiet murder in all kinds of creative ways. You also learn to adapt. You make a new cloak from spare scraps and dye it with leftover ink and berry juice. It smells like jam, but blends better in twilight. You start carrying dry crumbs in your pocket just in case you need a distraction or appeasement. And you carve a little talisman, a crude goose, wings raised in triumph. You tie it to your belt as a reminder, not of failure, but of unpredictability, and of the deep, irrational fury that poultry can inspire. The next job is in a tavern, involving a corrupt taxman and a fake purse of stolen coins. You ace it. Slip in, slip out. No geese. But when you return, Wyman is waiting. He hands you a parcel wrapped in linen. Inside, a roasted goose leg. He smirks. Thought you'd want revenge. You eat it. Slowly. With satisfaction. In your journal tucked under your cot, and written in cipher, you record the event as encounter with avian adversary, concluded. No further comment. You sleep that night without dreaming. Or, at least, if you do dream, it does not involve wings. It's barely dawn when the shouting starts. You sit up in bed, groggy, cloak wrapped around your legs, as the monastery bells clang with alarming urgency. This isn't the usual someone dropped a candle alarm or Brother Alric's set the kitchen on fire again. No, this is worse. By the time you reach the courtyard, the place is buzzing. Whispers ripple through the novices. Someone important is dead and not by your hand. Not this time. Wyman appears, disheveled and irritated, waving a half-rolled parchment. New orders, he snaps. Your target's been killed by someone else. You blink. Then why am I being sent out? He thrusts the parchment into your chest. Because now you're the suspect. Turns out, the lord you were supposed to eliminate quietly, discreetly, next week was murdered last night. Someone slipped into his chambers during a thunderstorm and did the job perfectly. No witnesses. No trace. Except for one rather damning clue. Your code name, scrawled on the wall in soot. You stare at Wyman. I didn't do it. I know, he mutters. Which makes this all your problem now. So now, instead of quietly preparing for a clean kill, you're running through a forest with half a dozen mercenaries on your tail, trying to prove that you didn't kill a man you were absolutely planning to kill. You hide in an abandoned mill for a night, then slip into a traveling theater troupe, pretending to be a mute juggler. The jester tries to recruit you permanently. You consider it. Briefly, back in town, wanted posters go up with your face poorly drawn. It looks like a cross between a startled frog and an angry nun. Still, it's recognizable enough that you have to stick to shadows, cloaks, and creative lies. I'm a chimney sweep. I'm a monk. I'm just very ugly. That last one actually works. You start asking around quietly about who might have had the same target. Turns out, you're not the only blade for hire in the region. There's talk of a rival, someone called the Briar, known for disappearing into hedges and never missing a mark. The problem is, no one's actually seen the Briar. They're more legend than person. Some say it's a woman. Some say it's 3 people working as one. Wymond, of course, refuses to confirm or deny any of it. Could be your mother, he says. Could be your future. You try to track the killer's movements by piecing together what's left at the scene. The soot writing is clever, meant to frame you, clearly. But the actual wound? Precise. Professional. A thin blade, angled up through the ribs. Not your style. You present your theory to Wymond. He listens, then shrugs. Doesn't matter. The wrong people believe it. And they do. The dead lord's brother puts a bounty on your head. Not much, just enough to get the local drunk to start watching you suspiciously when you pass through town. You spend the next week jumping at shadows, checking your food for tampering, and wondering if Lothar's soup is unusually bitter or just. Lothar, why? Historians still debate the existence of rival assassin circles in medieval Europe. Some claim these were informal, overlapping networks with no central control. Others insist there were turf wars, competing contracts, even professional feuds. You're now living proof that being freelance has its drawbacks. You try to clear your name the only way you can find the real killer, which means tracking down someone who doesn't want to be found. You retrace their steps. Talk to kitchen boys, stable hands, laundry maids. Most are tight-lipped. One tells you he saw someone in the corridor that night, small, fast, with a limp. You file that away. A limp. Not many people can murder flawlessly while dragging a leg. Greta suggests it might be Brother Alric. You laugh. She doesn't. Lothar suggests poisoning yourself just enough to fake death and reset your name. You politely decline. Eventually, you find something useful, a discarded glove left behind in the nobleman's room. Soft leather, stitched with an odd symbol, 3 thorns wrapped in a spiral. You've seen it before. On a tavern wall. A calling card. You're close now. Too close. The next night, someone tries to stab you in your sleep. They fail. Mostly because you've been sleeping in short shifts with a dagger in each hand. You wrestle them to the floor, cloak over their face, and they flee limping. You don't pursue. You don't need to. Now you have a direction. You report it all to Wymond. He says nothing for a long while. Then, you're not as useless as I thought. Coming from him, it's basically a declaration of affection. By week's end, the trail goes cold. The Briar is gone. Vanished. Probably onto their next mark. But the framing? The false posters? Those start to fade from walls. Either the bounty's been lifted, or someone bigger came in and said enough. You never find out for sure, but you do earn a new kind of respect. Among the Brotherhood. Among the handlers. Even from that merchant who once hired you for a chicken and a pat on the head. They look at you differently now. You're not just some wide-eyed novice in a bad cloak. You're someone who's been hunted and lived. Someone who might be worth watching. Even worth fearing. Your escape route is blocked by a pig cart and a pair of arguing masons. You duck behind a pile of bricks, clutching your ribs, blood sticky through your tunic, and wonder just briefly if this is how it ends. Bleeding out in an alley that smells like old cabbage while 2 men argue about wall angles. The job had gone wrong. Not just a little wrong. Not we spooked a dog and had to jump in a moat wrong. Spectacularly wrong. It started simple. Sneak into Baron Godfrey's manor and retrieve a ledger. No killing. No confrontations. A smash and grab with a stealthy flair. Except the Baron had moved the ledger into a locked trunk inside his bedroom, which was occupied by the Baron and his mistress and 2 dogs. You tried to back out. Quietly. You failed. The first guard spotted you. The second stabbed you. You stabbed back, then tripped over a bronze chamber pot and fell out the window onto a rose trellis. You hobbled into the night, ribs aching, vision swimming. Somehow, you made it to the edge of the city before collapsing behind a butcher's stall, where an apprentice boy helpfully poured vinegar on your wound and called it holy water. That's when you met Oswin the barber surgeon. Now, Oswin isn't technically qualified to do anything but cut hair and pull teeth, but he claims a close friendship with a man who once saw a battlefield. You're in no position to argue. You're dragged into his back room, laid on a table that smells like pig bristle, and told to bite down on this belt. He pours wine over the wound. Not clean wine. Sticky, leftover wine from the bottom of a barrel. You pass out somewhere between you'll feel a little pressure and is that your rib or a button. When you wake, you're stitched, swaddled, and thoroughly groggy. Oswin is humming a Gregorian chant while whittling a splinter from his thumb. You'll live, he says. Probably. Fringe accounts suggest that medieval surgery was often performed with whatever was handy. Fish hooks, bone needles, boiling oil, and prayers. Some surgeons had actual training, most had sharp knives, and an alarming amount of confidence. Oswin falls firmly in the latter category. You limp back to the monastery 3 days later, hunched and grumbling, like a vulture with a hangover. Greta gasps when she sees your bandages. Tomas offers you his last loaf of bread already nibbled by mice. But it's the thought that counts. Wymond, of course, is unimpressed. You got the wrong ledger anyway, he says, flipping through your hard-earned prize. This is just tax records for pigs. You almost stab him. Almost. Instead, you collapse into bed and sleep for 12 hours, interrupted only by a vivid dream in which Oswin tries to sew your eyebrows together while humming Ave Maria. The wound heals slowly. You walk with a lean. You grunt more often. Your blade arm aches during storms. You start muttering weather predictions like a cursed farmer. Pain in the shoulder, must be rain coming. Your fellow assassins nod solemnly. Injury changes you, makes you cautious, or reckless. It depends. You develop a new habit scanning every room for exits, counting guards, measuring windows with your eyes. You grow paranoid of alley corners, of clinking armor behind closed doors. You stop trusting unlocked doors. You start trusting your gut. One evening, Greta asks, "Do you ever wonder why we're doing this?" You shrug. Gold. Revenge. Honor. She snorts. We haven't seen gold. Revenge is too poetic. And honor died in a latrine behind the bishop's banquet hall. She's not wrong. You wonder if anyone becomes an assassin by choice. Or if it just happens. A bad start. A lost cause. A moment of desperation that never really ends. Still, there are moments. Moments where the job goes right. Where you slip through shadows, retrieve what no one else could, vanish before the candles flicker. Moments when the wound stops aching and the breath is steady and you think maybe you are good at this. Then you try to bend over and feel your stitches pull. So maybe not today. Historians suggest that wounded assassins were sometimes retired early given quiet jobs copying scrolls or maintaining arsenals. But you? You don't want a desk. You want redemption. Your next mission is light duty. Tale of visiting merchant suspected of spying. No confrontation, just observation. You follow him through the streets of Dunvale, noting his strange habits. Eating dried prunes at every meal, polishing his belt buckle before speaking, whistling a 4-note tune when alone. You record everything. Deliver the report. 2 days later, The merchant vanishes. Was he guilty? Did someone else act? No one tells you. But Wyman drops a small pouch of coins on your bunk. Back on your feet, he mutters, "Try not to leak this time." You take it. Quietly. Your ribs still ache. Your shoulder clicks. But the pain is familiar now. Yours. That night, you sharpen your dagger by candlelight, slow and steady, and think about that alleyway full of bricks and argument. About the butcher boy. About Oswin's terrible wine. About how many things had to go just wrong for you to live. And you smile. Because you did live. And now, you're sharper than before. You're woken by a knock at the monastery gate, not the rhythmic rap of a messenger, but the slow, measured thud of someone very official and very annoyed. You don't need to be told who it is. You already feel the dread blooming behind your eyes. The church has found out. More specifically, someone from the local parish has sent word up the ladder. A young priest saw you in the alley 2 nights ago, slipping out of a townhouse with a blood-streaked dagger and an expression that definitely did not say forgiveness. And now a bishop's man is here, with questions, and a very pointy cross. Brother Alric sends you to the cellar. Greta starts burning certain scrolls. Wyman doesn't even look up from his meal. It was inevitable, he says through a mouthful of onion broth. The Inquisition's got its robes in a twist again. You hide. For 3 days. In the cold storage room, sandwiched between sacks of dried lentils and a barrel of something labeled important fish. You hear footsteps overhead, sermons at the gates, muttered prayers that are only half meant for God. Eventually, you're summoned. Not to be turned in yet, but to help handle the situation. That young priest, the one who spotted you, he's been preaching odd things since. Saying you vanished into mist, that your shadow moved without your body, that he saw the devil himself wearing a wool cloak and poorly mended boots. You're flattered in a way. Wyman snorts. He's either mad, guilty, or too clever for his own robes. You're sent to the village to observe. Discreetly, of course. You sit in the back pew during one of the priest's sermons. He speaks and trembles, gaze flicking toward every shadow. You watch him flinch when the bell tolls. He's not lying. He really believes what he saw. This isn't ideal, because when the church smells fear, it doesn't offer comfort. It sends men, with ropes, and torches. Sure enough, a week later, an inquisitor arrives. Pale robes, shaved head, gaze like a sharpened nail. His name is Father Marone, and he smiles too much. The kind of smile that says, "Tell me your sins, then tell me your neighbors." Historians still argue whether inquisitors actually rooted out heresy or simply terrified everyone into acting holy. Judging by Marone's methods, it's definitely the latter. He sets up shop in the village, takes confessions, asks questions, talks about strange figures in the woods and whispers of unnatural deeds. Never says your name, but he doesn't need to. You're assigned to misdirect. You leave symbols in the wrong places. You spread rumors of a one-legged warlock living in the swamp. You forge letters suggesting a noble's bastard son might be dabbling in the dark arts. Within days, the villagers are pointing fingers at each other. You should feel bad. You don't. Well, maybe a little. But mostly, you feel relieved when Marone packs his holy baggage and departs, convinced the devil's tucked away in someone else's chicken coop. Still, the whole ordeal leaves you shaken. Because now you know something vital. You are being watched. Not just by nobles or rivals, but by faith itself. And faith doesn't need proof. It only needs a whisper. Back at the monastery, the novices treat you differently. Some avoid your gaze. Others bring you food, as if trying to appease something dangerous. Lothar simply pats your shoulder and says, "If they burn you, can I have your boots?" You get new orders soon after. A merchant in the city has been passing on information to church agents. The job is clear. Silence him. Quietly. Permanently. You track him to a bathhouse steam-filled. echoing with laughter and mild threats. You pose as an attendant. Wait until he's alone. He talks to himself as he sinks into the water, muttering prayers and business numbers in the same breath. You drown him gently. Hold him under until the bubbles stop. He never sees your face. When you return, Wyman nods. The church likes its secrets, he says. But so do we. Fringe records suggest assassins often crossed paths with inquisitors, not always as enemies. Some were rumored to work for the church, eliminating heretics too delicate for public trials. Others were simply eliminated themselves. You begin to wonder which path you're walking. That night, you dream of Marone, of his two clean hands and his soft, probing questions, of the way he looked at you without knowing your name, yet somehow knowing. You wake in sweat, knife in hand, alone. In the morning, there's another letter, a new assignment. It's not from Wyman, not from the monastery. The seal is unmarked. You open it. For words. We're watching. Stay faithful. You burn it. Slowly. Thoroughly. And you start sleeping with a second knife under your pillow, just in case the next priest isn't so easily fooled. You smell sulfur long before you see the fire. It's coming from the edge of the village, where the apothecary lives in a crooked hut with windows made of waxed parchment and a roof that occasionally sighs. Locals whisper that she's a witch. You've been sent to find out if that's true, or at least to find out whether she's a threat. You'd hoped for a quiet job, something that didn't involve strange powders and chickens nailed to door frames. But the letter was clear: investigate, report, eliminate if necessary. No timeline, no backup, no explanation. So here you are, in the company of ash-scented herbs and a woman who greets you by name before you introduce yourself. Figured they'd send someone younger, she says, pouring something thick and green into a cracked bowl. But you'll do. You try to play dumb. You're just a traveler, looking for medicine. Got a pain in your ribs that flares up during full moons. She laughs and hands you a paste that smells like boiled moss and despair. You try not to breathe through your nose. Her name is Sabine. She's old probably. Her eyes are sharp, and her fingers stain the color of dusk. The villagers won't go near her, but they'll leave offerings at her door: eggs, carrots, old silver buttons. They're afraid, and that's the point. You begin your investigation. You poke through her garden. Strange plants, yes, but nothing illegal. Unless you count illegal shapes. You check her library books in Latin, Greek, something that might be Welsh, but also might be spilled ink. There's a tome bound in snakeskin. You don't open it. You ask questions. Quietly. The local baker says Sabine cured his daughter of night sweats. The butcher says she once resurrected a goat. The goat turned out to be sleeping. You're starting to believe she's not a witch. Just odd, and possibly incredibly bored. But then, things get weird. You wake one night to find Sabine outside your room, sprinkling something in a circle around your cot. Warding, she says. Not for you. For what's following you. You tell her she's mistaken. She isn't. There's something stuck to your shadow. She whispers. Been there a while. You haven't noticed? You laugh. Uncomfortably. Historians still argue whether magic played any real role in medieval politics. Some say witchcraft was just an excuse to punish outsiders. Others swear that certain wise women possessed knowledge far beyond the church's understanding. You don't know what you believe, but your shadow does seem longer these days. Sabine gives you a vial before you leave. For clarity, she says, or for indigestion. Depends on what you eat first. Back at the monastery, Wyman reads your report and snorts. Not a witch. Just lonely. He files the scroll away, then pauses. Still, best not to anger her. Greta nods so hard, she almost spills her tea. You think the job is over. It's not. 2 weeks later, a nobleman's son turns up dead frozen in a smile, skin the color of pewter. No wounds. No blood, just stiff. The cause? An elixir sold by a traveling herbalist who claimed to be Sabine's cousin. You're sent back. Sabine's hut is empty, the garden dead, the air thick with silence. On the door is a mark, a spiral inside a triangle. You recognize it, same as the seal from the letter you burned. You realize Sabine wasn't just an eccentric. She was part of something bigger. A network? A guild? A coven? You search the hut. Behind a panel, you find a journal, written in cipher. You translate the first line. They're watching us now, even through the stone. You stop there. You burn it. Like the letter, like the doubts. Because suddenly this job, this life, feels less like shadows and blades, and more like layers of secrets folded so tight they might never come apart. You report Sabine as relocated. Wyman doesn't ask questions. He knows when not to. Later, Greta shows you a charm she keeps in her boot. For luck, she says. For protection. Got it from a hedge witch in the south. Said I'd need it. You ask, need it from what? She doesn't answer. You sleep that night with your second dagger under your pillow. The next morning, it's warm, as if someone held it. Fringe records mention assassin-witch alliances, though most are considered legends. The assassin who walked through fire, the poisoner who could curse a name from across the sea, the dagger that could whisper. You used to scoff. You don't anymore. Instead, you light a candle, and you whisper a name, not out of fear, out of caution, because if Sabine's still alive and you think she knows yours, too. There's no pension. You realize this while hiding in a hayloft, eating a stolen apple, and watching a falconer train birds to dive at wooden targets. You're not quite sure how this became your current life, waiting for nightfall to slip into a counting house guarded by falcons, but you know one thing. This can't go on forever. Your back hurts more than it should. Your knees creak when it rains. Your left hand has a tremor that comes and goes, especially after long jobs. You used to laugh at the older assassins, those with missing fingers, cloudy eyes, stories too dramatic to be true. Now, you are one of them, and you're barely 30. Retirement, such as it is, means one thing: disappearing. There's no golden ring, no ceremony, no slow walk into the sunset. Just a new name, a new village, and the hope that your past doesn't come knocking in the form of an old mark or a suspicious local priest. You hear stories. A legendary killer who now tends goats in the Alps. A poisoner who runs a brewery in Bruges. A former handler who faked his death, joined the clergy, and now gives sermons about cutting sin at the root. You suspect half of it is nonsense. The rest might be worse. You write a letter, not to anyone real, not to be sent, just a test. You sign it Elias the Tired and fold it 3 times. You burn it. The flame's quiet, final, comforting. Then you get called back for another job. A simple one, Wyman promises. Just a message drop near the border. No weapons, no targets. You travel alone, dressed as a traveling scribe, carrying a bundle of fake religious texts and one real letter hidden in a hollowed-out psalter. On the road, you meet a farmer heading south. He talks too much, has a face like a shovel, but his questions are kind, not suspicious. He asks where you're from. You lie. He nods, smiles, and tells you about his sheep. You start to envy him. The drop goes smoothly, scroll hidden in a pile of bricks near an abandoned well. Signal left in the form of a knotted red thread. You leave quietly, but on the way back, you stop in a village you've never seen before. Small, quiet, filled with the smell of hearth fires and bread. You think, I could stay, but then a child runs past wearing a wooden sword. She points at you and says, "Are you a knight or a thief?" You don't answer. You leave before dawn. Back at the monastery, Greta is fletching arrows. She offers you a seat. You watch her hands move with purpose. You ask her if she's ever thought of quitting. She laughs, not cruelly, Quitting what? This life? No, you say. Just this life. She pauses. I don't think we stop. I think we change costumes. Tomas says he'll retire after one more big job. One more, he repeats every time. Lothar's already halfway retired. He spends more time in the garden than in training. You think he's planning to just forget to come back one day. Fringe documents suggest there were escapees from the life, men and women who vanished into the folds of peasantry, changed their names, married, aged, died of quiet causes. Some even lived long enough to forget how sharp a blade feels in the palm. Others, not so lucky. You draft a plan, just in case. A coastal village, a small forge. You've always liked working with your hands. You make a list of names you might use. Martin, Aldwin, Jonas. None of them feel like you. Maybe that's the point. Then a new letter arrives. Not from Wymond. From someone else. No seal. Just folded parchment and 4 words. One last chance. Wales. You stare at it for a long time. Fold it. Refold it. Burn it. But that night, you lay out your tools and pack them anyway. Because maybe it's a trap. Maybe it's freedom. Maybe it's both. And if it's real, you'll need to be ready. You tell no one. But Greta catches your gaze across the hall the next morning and gives you a long, steady nod. No smile. No questions. She understands. She's seen that look before. It's the look of someone who's almost gone, but not quite. It begins with rain. Not a gentle drizzle or poetic mist, real rain. The kind that feels personal. Sheets of it hammer the slate roof above as you press yourself against a damp stone wall, clutching a crossbow and cursing every decision that led to this moment. You're halfway through a routine, hit nothing flashy. Break into a minor lord's manor, remove a troublesome advisor, slip out with a forged wool tucked inside your cloak. Simple. You've done harder jobs in worse places. But tonight, everything goes wrong. First, the gatehouse wasn't unmanned like the letter said. It was, in fact, fully staffed. With archers. Then the servant who was supposed to leave the back door ajar apparently got cold feet, or worse, got dead. Finally, someone must have tipped off the manor guard, because instead of silence and shadows, you found yourself face to face with 6 men and a very large, very angry mastiff. You lost the will. You lost your left glove. And now you're hiding in the manor's privy, trying not to breathe too loudly or drop your only remaining sausage, which you've been saving since lunch and might have to eat cold. This is not legendary. This is damp and cold and humiliating. Historians rarely mention the bad nights, the missions where everything unravels. But if they did, they might begin with something like, and lo, the assassin crouched in the Lord's lavatory, armed with hope and a slowly dampening crossbow. You listen to the guards argue outside. They're not sure where you went. That's your only advantage. You wait. 1 hour. Then another. You start naming the spiders on the ceiling. Finally, a window of silence. You slip out, dart across the hallway, and duck into a linen room. There you find 2 things, dry socks and a servant's uniform. You make the trade. Your boots squish as you walk, but at least you look legitimate. The goal now isn't success. It's survival. You find a kitchen. Empty. You swipe a half loaf of bread and tuck the crossbow under a pile of cabbages. Outside, the courtyard is a mess, mud, guards, dogs, and thunder. You blend. Move like you belong. Carry a bucket you don't need. Nod to a guard. Avoid eye contact. Then it happens. Lightning cracks, lighting up the yard, and someone sees you. The alarm is shouted. Again. You don't run. You bolt. Over the wall. Through the stables. Into the night, cloak flapping behind you like a wet flag of retreat. By the time you reach the treeline, you're gasping, bleeding again, and the sausage is gone. You don't stop until you're miles away, hidden in a shepherd's hut abandoned for the season. There, you collapse. Exhausted, cold, laughing. Because the absurdity of it all, the rain, the privy, the sausage, it's too much. This was supposed to be your final job. The one with clean lines, decent pay, a quiet exit. Instead, you're half-dressed, soaked to the bone, and trying to warm your hands over a candle stub like some very unlucky monk. When you limp back to the monastery 2 days later, you're ready for Wyman's insults. Ready for Greta's smirk, but not for what's waiting. A bard, singing in the courtyard. He strums a lute, voice warbling, and tells a tale of a silent shadow who vanished into thunder, of a plot foiled by a mysterious rogue who escaped 100 guards and lived to haunt the night. It's about you. Sort of. It's not accurate. You didn't leap over the burning tapestries. You tripped on a rug and fell through a curtain. But the audience is eating it up. Even Lothar claps. You glare at Wyman. He shrugs. Couldn't stop it. Story got out. The bard winks at you later. Hope I didn't embellish too much. You don't answer, but you do hum the tune when no one's listening. Historians often debate how legends begin. Some say it's a slow burn of quiet deeds. Others think it's one explosive event. But more often than not, it starts with the truth accidentally sounding like fiction. You rest for a few days. Patch your wounds. Wash your cloak twice. The manor's still standing, the target's still alive, and the wool long gone. But for reasons you don't fully understand, the job is considered a success. Because no one cares about paperwork when they've got a song. And now, for better or worse, your name, or at least your story, is traveling faster than your footsteps. You're a legend now. A very soggy, half-fed, bruised legend. But a legend all the same. You never hear the song again. Not in full, at least. Just fragments sung by drunkards in the marketplace, whispered by pickpockets near the docks, or scrawled in charcoal on the back wall of an inn. He walks like wind through thunder's gate and leaves no echo in his wake. It's flattering, but also irritating, because the version of you that exists in these stories isn't real. That assassin, fearless, flawless, and apparently capable of walking on rooftops while balancing a wine goblet, isn't the person who still limps slightly from a healed rib fracture, who forgets his own cover names when he's sleepy, and who once nearly died choking on a too large pear slice mid-mission. But the myth? It's stronger than the man. And now, you find yourself bumping into it. Everywhere. You overhear a gang of street urchins debating whether you're a ghost. One insists you ride a black wolf and steal people's shadows. Another claims you killed a dragon using only a sharpened spoon. You don't correct them, because now, the stories protect you more than any cloak ever did. Except when they don't. One afternoon, you enter a tavern and disguise a simple farmer's tunic, travel dust on your boots. You order boiled meat and ale and settle in. But the innkeeper eyes you too long. The serving girl keeps sneaking glances. Then you hear it. He's too quiet, someone mutters. Too clean. But he's the ghost man. And you know, you can't stay. The legend has become a shadow you can't shake. This wouldn't be a problem if you were retired. Or dead. But instead, you've just taken another job. A quiet contract in the north. A baron suspected of treason, guarded by his private militia and a moat filled with questionable eels. You're not there yet, but you've already heard 2 songs about his upcoming mysterious demise, which is alarming. Greta warns you before you leave. The more people think they know you, the harder it is to disappear. You nod. She hands you a small gift, an old ring etched with 2 spirals. Found it on a body 3 winters ago, she says. Guy had no name, but he had style. You wear it on your smallest finger. Superstition. Or solidarity. Wyman doesn't say goodbye. He never does. But as you saddle your horse, he tosses you a flask. Don't drink it all. Or do. Not my problem. You leave at dawn, traveling light. 3 days on the road. Then, The plan collapses. You arrive to find the Baron's castle already under siege, not from invaders, but from his own family. A brother, a cousin, and a very determined nephew, all laying claim to his lands. You watch the chaos from the edge of a wooded ridge and think, this is not the clean kill I was promised. You sneak in anyway. Under cover of smoke from a burning granary, you slip through a sally port and into the chaos of a castle at war with itself. You pass shouting servants, looted storerooms, and a knight bleeding into a wheel of cheese. Eventually, you find your mark. The Baron is barricaded in the chapel, surrounded by guards and his personal priest. You watch, wait, then strike. Not with a blade, but with an idea. You drop forged letters into the hands of the Baron's nephew, proof of betrayal from within. The priest flees. The guards scatter. The Baron's final words are not to you, but to his own blood. It's the cleanest job you've ever done, and your hands never touch a weapon. Historians still argue whether the famed assassin known as the Whisper of Rain actually existed, or was merely a convenient name used to explain impossible disappearances and unsolved murders. Some say he was a collective fiction. Others believe he was one man. Maybe two. Maybe you. You return to the monastery weeks later. No one sees you arrive, but your name is already there, scratched into the bottom of the ledger in the cellar, next to a dried poppy and the phrase, "He succeeded without sound." Lothar nods once when he sees you. Greta offers no questions, just bread. Wyman looks up, briefly. Didn't expect you back. Neither did I, you say. You sleep that night in silence. And somewhere, in a tavern far away, another bard sings the chorus again. He kills without a blade or flame, leaves nothing but a whispered name. You close your eyes, and let the song go on without you. It starts with a coin. Not a normal coin. Not the kind jingled in a drunk's purse or tossed to beggars in market squares. This one is heavy, cold, pressed with a symbol you've seen only once before years ago, etched into a letter from someone who claimed to offer freedom. You find it on your bunk. No note, just the coin. Greta sees it first. Her eyes widen just enough to count as alarm. Is that? You nod. You don't say the name. You don't have to. She already knows. Wyman says nothing, as usual. But later, he drops a sealed scroll beside your cot and walks away. No speech. No clever insults. Just the silence of someone who knows this is the end of a long, muddy road. You wait until dusk to open it. The contract is brief. No floored language. No elaborate plan. Just a name, a location, and one line. In this, you've earned it. The mark? The Archbishop of Harrogate. You sit very still, because this isn't just another corrupt noble, or a traitorous scribe, or even a rival assassin. This is the man, the one who's been pulling strings from behind the altar for years, who turned whispers into inquisitions, who tried more than once to erase your kind. Killing him is not a job. It's a message. You travel alone, under a false name. Old tools, old cloak, the ring Greta gave you still on your hand. You carry the coin in your boot. Heavy, solid, like the weight of what you're about to do. Harrogate is cold. Stone towers piercing gray skies. Church bells tolling like heartbeats. You blend in. Watch. Learn. The Archbishop is cautious, but not careful enough. He trusts his robes, his walls, his choir of armed guards and cassocks. You wait for the storm. The actual storm clouds breaking overhead as the feast of St. Remus begins. Crowds fill the cathedral. Chants echo through archways. You walk among them, head bowed, hands clasped like a penitent, a sinner seeking forgiveness. The Archbishop appears. He wears gold-threaded robes, rings on every finger, a smile that does not reach his eyes. He blesses the masses, but you see at the calculation, the cold precision. Your blade never leaves its sheath. Because this time, the killing is not in the strike. It's in the silence. You whisper his name. He freezes, stares. Then you hand him a note. One sentence. The last thing his most trusted confessor ever wrote before he vanished. Before you made sure his record's burned. The Archbishop reads it, and for a moment, you see him age. Collapse, not physically, but inward, like a candle under a bell jar. He doesn't call for guards. He doesn't scream. He just sits down, and you walk away. Historians will never agree on what happened that day. Some say the Archbishop fell ill during Massachusetts. Others say he confessed to heresies and was whisked away by church officials. But those who were there who really watched say he died with his eyes open, and no one could tell why. You return to the monastery one last time, but you don't enter. You leave the coin at the gate. Greta finds it. She doesn't follow. Wymond reads the letter you left, then burns it. Your name is never spoken again within those walls. Because you're gone. Not dead. Not vanished. Just gone. There's a cottage in the hills of northern Wales. It has a garden full of weeds, a creaking fence, and a view of the sea when the fog clears. You live there now. Some days you fish. Some days you watch the waves. Some nights you dream of ink and goats and thunder and the eyes of the first man you ever killed. No one bothers you. Sometimes a traveler passes through, hears a rumor, sings a verse, looks at you too long. You smile. Let them wonder. Because you are no longer the weasel, or the whisper, or the nameless figure in the alleyway. You are whoever you say you are. And the legends? They can walk on their own now. The storm has passed now. The candle burns low beside you, its flickering light casting soft, warm shadows across your room. Outside, the rain has slowed to a hush, a whisper of droplets against leaves, a lullaby for tired eyes. And inside, you lie still, heavy with the weight of stories, of old cloaks, of footsteps taken in silence and choices made in shadow. It's strange, isn't it? How even the loudest lives can end so quietly. No final duel, no dramatic betrayal, just a slow exhale in a place where no one knows your name. Not because you're hiding, but because you've finally stopped running. Let that thought hold you for a moment. Imagine the quiet of the hills, the pull of the sea, the stillness that waits at the edge of every well-lived life. No daggers, no orders, just peace. Honest, uneven, earned peace. And maybe, if you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of those old footsteps soft against cobblestone, brushing through dew-covered grass. Not coming for you, not chasing, just fading into the distance. Let your breath slow now. Let your eyes drift.